Hello everyone, my name is Dominion Onyx, and over the next couple of minutes I'm going to talk to you briefly about 6 simple steps to plan your next event. First, just a little bit about myself. I am one of the founders and current pledge master of Onyx Mid-Atlantic. Onyx is a leather fraternity for gay and bisexual men of color. We have 9 chapters across the country in Chicago, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, New York City, Fort Lauderdale, Cleveland, Dallas, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. So here's the situation. You have just been voluntold that you're going to plan and manage your organization's event. Well, I'm here to help you figure out some steps and some actions to take to make that happen without you killing yourself or anyone else. So we're going to talk about long-range planning. We're going to talk about budget creation and reconciliation, event branding and threading, message creating and customization, new media market techniques, and enjoying the event when everyone else wants a piece of your time. So what are the steps? It's pretty simple, actually. You're going to plan, you're going to budget, you're going to brand, you're going to message, market, and then hopefully with everything in place, you'll enjoy. So when you get started with the planning exercise, you're going to let history inform some of your choices. You're going to look at lessons learned from previous iterations of the event, both oral and written. You're going to look at who attended your event the last time or the last several times. And you're going to look at the budget reconciliation, because that's a key after action activity to figure out how much money you actually spent versus how much you plan to spend. But also don't let yourself be constrained by the past. The first thing, and one of the most important steps to figure out, is who are the decision makers for the event? Who controls the checkbook? Who controls the political agenda for the organization? Who are the key stakeholders from whom you need to get buy-in and or actual authorization and approval to make the event happen? So one way to do this, to get started with this planning portion of it, is to conduct what's called a design thinking exercise. And design thinking is a group-centered, non-linear, iterative process that will help you understand your attendees. It'll challenge some of your assumptions and help you redefine the problems that you'll have as it relates to planning your event. And there are 5 steps to this process. You're going to empathize, you're going to define, you're going to ideate, you're going to prototype, and you're going to test those prototypes. So let's talk a little bit about each one of those steps in turn. So empathize. So you're going to document your attendees' needs, and there's a number of ways to do that. You can document them through surveys that you give to your attendees or all of your stakeholder groups. You can interview actual stakeholders. You can have other kinds of feedback, like for instance, if you have hashtags, you can look to see who has checked those hashtags and see what kind of audience you're getting. And you need to make sure that you're capturing all of the different kinds of groups that will attend your event, excuse me. So next you're going to define by stating the event problem. You're going to analyze all of those observations and develop some core challenges that need to be addressed with this event. So during ideation, that's the main part of it. And some of you may have seen this, you may have only gotten to the ideate part, which is, it's a sticky note based activity where you're going to look for alternatives to solve the problems, and there's no idea that's off the table. This is the part that's non-linear. We're not going to start at the beginning and work towards the end. We're going to throw out ideas, and if your idea is about something that happens right in the middle, that's completely fine, because we'll organize that and put them in a structure from start to finish later. With all of your ideas in place, then you're going to create prototypes, which is when you're going to develop solutions. And your solutions may be different kinds of templates, different kinds of processes, and things like that. And you're going to figure out, do those solutions best meet the challenge? And then you're going to test those out. You're going to do a bunch of dry runs. And you may end up going back over some of these steps because it's an iterative process. You're going to solve one challenge, and solving that challenge leads to another challenge. So as you get started with design thinking, be sure to avoid personal biases. Things like someone saying, I don't want to learn a new system. Maybe this is how we've always done it. Well, this is just too hard. Or maybe my buddy will give us a discount. That's an important one. Just because your buddy offers you a discount doesn't mean that your buddy offers the best service. There are processes, there are procedures to choosing vendors and how those things happen. And then one of the big ones we hear is that, or that you may hear, is that we've just never done it this way before. Well, that's the whole point of this, is to do things different than you've done before in an effort to make things better. Now, it's all about the sticky notes. So during the Empathize step, you're going to, again, figure out who your audience is through surveys, interviews, feedback, and other things. Then you're going to, imagine it. We have a wall. Here's our wall. And on the wall, we have a couple of sticky notes that represent core challenges that need to be solved, like the experience for the audience, the experience for the vendors, the experience for the hotel staff, the experience for the volunteers. And then underneath each one of those, people are going to be asked ideas about how we're going to solve those challenges. So maybe for the attendees, all right, we need to have a registration desk. We need to have a way for people to pay. Under volunteers, we need to have a suite, particularly for the volunteers. Under the hotel staff, we need to have a main point of contact for the hotel staff. And ideally, the larger the group that helps you do this, the more stickies you'll have. So you could potentially have tens, dozens, or hundreds of stickies under a group. And then you organize those and figure out ways that those challenges can be solved. So you're not actually solving the problem, you're identifying the problem and potential solutions, and then you're figuring out mechanisms by which you solve the issues, and that's where you prototype, by coming up with activities and processes. So activities, you're answering questions like, how do we pay service providers? How do we accept payments? How do we secure venues? How do we limit our liability? How do we secure permission to take photos? And a lot of that happens by having contracts. So we have contracts for paying providers and for securing venues. We have solutions for payments such as Venmo and Square and others. Now, we're not going to talk about them too much because we're not actually getting money from them. But it's important to figure out ways to control expenses and processes by creating standards and using best practices. Sometimes those prototypes will be processes, such as creating a budget template that you'll review on a regular basis as the event moves forward. Some of those processes might be how you contact vendors and creating standard vendor letters so that you can reach out to vendors in a consistent way with a consistent message about what your event is. You may have processes about how you will communicate internally using things like Slack or GroupMe. You may have processes for external communications. For instance, LLC uses a YAP, which is a web-based and phone-based app for communication with everyone who has signed up for the event. You can also use things like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, but again, all of these are just tools and you'll have to figure out how to make those work. There are also processes around registration using sites like Jotform and Eventbrite. So now the next letter, B. We've done planning, and now it's time to budget. There's two aspects to budgeting. How much does the event cost, and how are you going to pay for it? When you're thinking about how much the event costs, you start by dreaming big. Think of everything that you want to do. This is the, I don't even know if people consider Cadillac the best car anymore, but let's assume they do. The Cadillac solution. Everything that you could possibly want. Then you start to plan conservatively. So the idea is not that you want the Cadillac per se is that you want all of the features and the functions of a Cadillac. And we can all agree that all of the things that you want in a Cadillac may be achieved through another car brand that is less expensive, right? So that's what you're doing here. You're figuring out what are the critical events and activities and things that need to be paid for, and then you're figuring out how to pay for them. Make your budget scalable. So as you're planning for this event, hopefully you'll be blessed by getting more people than you attend. I'll give you an example. I belong to this organization, Onyx. We planned an event once where typically we never got more than 40 or 50 people. And the year that I was tasked with planning it, we surpassed that 40 or 50 mark 8 months out from the event. We eventually had more than 200 people show up. So we had to scale our budget and all of our activities so that everything that we did still was able to be paid for. For an example, when you buy a bus, well, not buy a bus, but rent a bus, the bus has 50 seats. At some point, as you start to buy more and more buses, the price point per bus can go up or down. Same thing with like t-shirts. 100 t-shirts has one price point, but then the next available price point for t-shirts might only be for 500 t-shirts. And if you only have 250 attendees, now suddenly you're stuck with t-shirts that you don't need and you don't need to pay for. So that's what I mean by making things scalable. Leave nothing to chance. That's what all of those stickies are for, is to make sure that we've captured all of the things that need to be done. And by capturing all the things that we need to do, we capture all the things that we need to pay for. And conduct budgeting exercises. Categorize your budget by venue. So put all of the costs in terms of venues, put all of the costs in terms of activities, put all of the costs in terms of participant experiences, and make sure that at the bottom line, all your numbers add up. Because if you do, that's sort of a check on yourself to make sure that you have captured everything. Also, as you're developing your budget and you're getting quotes and everything, save all of that in a centralized place so that you have a catalog of information that you can use in the future. Think about how you'll pay for the event. There's sponsor income. We as kinky people sometimes have access to organizations and businesses within the kink community that we can use. Other larger corporations such as liquor and beer sponsors, there's condom sponsors, there's other kinds of businesses who may be willing to contribute to offset some costs. Sometimes they may contribute prizes, sometimes they may contribute money, sometimes they may even pay for a particular thing in exchange for some branding. For instance, those t-shirts that you had to buy, maybe in exchange for their logo on the t-shirt, they'll cover the cost of those t-shirts. And think about those things. Try to think outside of the box. Think about how much you want to charge attendees for the event. But you always have to keep in mind the value proposition for the event. The value proposition says, this is why attendee X should choose to spend their money here as opposed to there. So when you think about the attendee fee, if you charge something that's out of line for what they're going to get, then you may find that people won't show up for your event. Also consider a la carte pricing. Everybody isn't going to want to go to everything. There may be certain kinds of events that are for a specific subclass of your attendees, and therefore other people may say, well, why should I have to pay for this if it's not for me, or I can't go, or something else? Think of it like this. If you're a person that doesn't have children and you're forced to deal with or pay extra even though you don't have children. So you should revisit those expenses as you start to develop the budget. This isn't something that happens once and the budget goes away. You should develop your first draft of the budget, typically 9 to 12 months out from the start of the event, and review that budget at least monthly and sometimes even more frequently, because things change. Prices may come in different than you actually plan. So your budget is not a hard and fast milestone. It is a moving, living document that defines costs as you actually encounter them. You should also consider hidden costs for things like transaction fees on each registration. If you use Square or PayPal, they charge a fee on top of whatever, well, not on top of, out of whatever fee that you charge. So if you charge $100, you may only see $97 of that. Think about marketing costs. In today's day and age, no one is giving away anything about themselves for free. So models have to be paid. Photographers have to be paid. You'll need studio costs to make your event look as professional as possible. And think about all of these things in terms of costs, and is the value proposition still being met? Now that we've planned and budgeted, now it's time to brand your event. Whatever your business is, think of imagery that is evocative of that brand. Let's say that you are the widget company. Well, if you're going to have your annual widget convention, the imagery that you put together needs to be explicit. And by explicit, I just mean detailed about what kind of widgets you're going to be talking about and everything from that image, so that people understand just from that image alone what they're getting out of the event. And be sure to thread elements throughout your marketing literature so that people see the theme from event to event. The best example of that is a jingle. Everyone knows "I'm loving it" from McDonald's. That's because that is a consistent theme that applies across all of their imagery, all of their media. If you're an organization who isn't super huge, you're going to have to think about what separates this iteration of the event from other iterations. So a large organization that has several thousand attendees doesn't necessarily need to do that, because they've got a monster of a machine and people already know exactly why they're coming and what they're going to get out of it from year to year. It is a known quantity in terms of experience. But for a smaller organization, each year might be somewhat different, and that's actually an opportunity for you to distinguish yourselves as an organization and to distinguish this iteration of the event from every other. And the way to do that is by developing specific taglines and tying that to the imagery. As you start to tie your branding to key messages, you're going to try to be concise but thorough. Make sure that your messaging addresses all key points, but keep it short. And remember that less is more. You should conduct the 5-second test with friends outside of your organization. For instance, when we started, I told you that Onyx is a leather fraternity for gay and bisexual men of color. That's our 5-second test. What's the 5-second test for your organization? Your visuals should be eye-catching. That's it?
Yeah, keep going.
Oh, well, it should be eye-catching. Your message should be visually appealing and professionally produced. It should also be format appropriate. Different kinds of media have different requirements in terms of image size or even image content. And make sure it's on a platform that you own. Don't trust publicly available social media like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. Make sure it's your own website, or at a minimum, a paid platform such as Reg Online or something, where you control the content and no one can tell you what you can and can't post there, and your platform can't suddenly go away. As you market, try to use hashtags effectively. Remember that less text is more impact. Avoid hashtags that are super long, and try to limit your hashtags to 3 to 5 hashtags. And as you read your hashtags from left to right, they should be specific to general. More specific meaning talking about this specific event, and at the end you have a general hashtag for your organization, so that you can use those hashtags to figure out how many people are interested, 1, in your specific event, and 2, in your organizations by clicking on those hashtags. That's also part of the surveying and feedback that you can get after and during the life of the event. As you market, be sure to deploy your base. Craft a message that your base can use and share. Define the channels that they can share on, and rotate the visuals so that you keep interest. If you use celebrity endorsements, and celebrity means something different in our communities, they can be elders, title holders, or any famous person, even a porn star. But the celebrity should be relevant to the event to which they're attending, and they should be willing to do whatever it is that makes them important or relevant to your community. For instance, everyone who is an adult film star typically may have another side business. But no one is asking you to come to the event to see that other side business. They want to see you because they want the fantasy that they're going to experience whatever it is that they're famous for. No one invites Beyonce to events to taste her cookie recipe. If you're interested, you can use a cross-pollination tool to simplify your marketing, such as if this, then that. That's IFTTT. That allows you to use one central service to cross-pollinate and cross-post to a number of different entities. What that does is allow you to have a consistent marketing, and it allows you to minimize the number of hands that touch your message as it gets pushed out. So, lastly, it's important to enjoy yourself. And enjoy yourself by designating time off during the event. Now, it's unlikely that you'll be able to take a whole day off or 2 or 3 days out of the event, but set aside a couple of hours for yourself. And you do that by designating responsibilities by events. So there are people who have defined responsibilities to that event so that you aren't always the one single point of failure or single point of access for the entire event. Create an event script that you'll review 3 to 5 times or more, and set a schedule of pre-event prep activities. And one thing to make sure you do is to set brief business processes and do not, under any circumstances, deviate from those business processes. And if you do have to deviate for some reason, because things happen, make sure that everyone knows. And as you plan for the success of your next event, conduct that post-mortem, gather those lessons learned, get your attendee demographics and do your budget reconciliation, and archive everything. Every signed document that you have, develop the list of attendees, catalog the goods and services you procured, and keep a catalog of all of your images. And those were 6 simple rules to planning your next event. Thank you.
Yes, hardcore.